I feel like the bar has been set up here, and I'm going to fall woefully short. But what I'm going to try and do for you guys during the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to structure this session slightly different to what Karen did. And my approach is rather going to be a lot of what we spoke about and talked about, and I don't think we ever sort of really get into, is how do we start thinking about and positioning L&D and learning, capability building in the business of language, the language of business, where we are talking to our customers and our customers' customers in ways that they understand. Right? So often we approach this, and I call it, has anybody listened to an IT guy give you a talk? So, who's or accountant? So I call that language Accountanese. You know what Accountanese is? It's like Chinese, right? But the language of accountants. And they will flood us with these fantastic words and things, and by the end of the day, we are so confused we don't know what to do. So I have a couple of questions for you as a start. As you're sitting here today, and you think back to this last financial year that you had, and maybe the last 3 to 6 months of that financial year, and as learning and development leaders and people working in business, maybe even as providers, how many of us have our L&D budget increased as we got towards the end of the year? So if your L&D budget went up, they said to you, you know what, you are adding so much value. And we can see the results that you're trying to get. And we are going to give you more money. So we have BP, that's better. So well done, BP. We're going to engage with that afterwards and see what caused it.
It now.
It's more of you must prove your existence as L&D.
Alright, so we must prove our existence. Tell me why I must give you more. Or why you must have the one that you already have. Or even best, why should I even spend this now? So that's one question I have. The other question then is, if I had to ask you right now, okay, what is the biggest asset on your company's balance sheet, okay? And what is the return that your company is generating from that asset? What was your company's gross profit margin at the end of last year? And how did you contribute to that? Not enough to feel bonus. Sorry? Not enough to feel a bonus. The conversation that I think that Barclays had with us. So listen, you know, if you don't start speaking the language of business and talk to the things that are important to them, and we get this accounting stuff out of the way, right, we are never going to be ready. And there's a couple of things that I think maybe we can sort of bounce around. And I have 3 questions for you to answer at the end of the day. Because I think this is what we're trying to do, yeah? Companies have the best laid strategies. And we want them to execute. We want our people to execute. But at the end of the day, no one does anything. It's just a nice hospital that they had, execs had, or the plan, and no one did it. So my questions for you are the following. At the end of this, let's say the 20 minutes, we're going to maybe workshop more of these specific questions rather than us having just first discussion. Right. So the first question is this, right? If you had to look at the business today, right, what are the biggest shifts we see in learning design? And we've heard some of them, right? So we heard, okay, so there's some big shifts happening in learning design, right? But the bigger question is, what is driving those shifts? What are the underlying factors that are happening in the industry that are driving shifts in learning? Okay? Because if we don't understand those, we end up reacting to whatever's cool, right, or whatever we think is cool, even worse. Okay? And we try and implement those in our business. We don't understand what's at the core of our customers and our customer's customer and what's driving that part of their behavior. We don't design the right stuff. Right? So that's the first question I want you to think about. The second question is about capability. We as an organization have not changed the way that we do things forever. Okay? abilities we need to learn that will increase our business relevance. It will increase our relevance to our business partners. So what do we need to take on board? When last have you sat down and designed a better learning program for the people who report to you? Okay. How do they become better business partners? Right. So that's the second question. And the third question then is a little futuristic in saying, you know what, if we had to look up 3 years from now, okay, what would our people, our business partners, what would they be saying about our ability to meet the challenges that they have on? Or would they just be saying, you know what, we tried this, it failed, it didn't work. The same thing happened with learning 5 years ago, and it's going to happen in the next 5 years, so we're going to find something else to do. How ready are we to take on those challenges? So I'm going to start this discussion with really just a whole lot of provocation, right? And stats thinking, right? So hey, here's some ideas, let's put it out there. And then as we're going through this, I want you to think through these three questions, and then we're going to workshop these 3 questions for about 20 minutes afterwards. Right? And I'll put the questions up at the end here. Right? So this is the situation we sit right now, okay? Anybody disagree with this? Paul disagrees with it. He says the world is not on edge.
The world's fine.
The world is fine, there's nothing wrong with it right
I'm
now.
not going to say there's anything wrong with it, but this is what we made. It's not on the edge of anything.
Okay? So this guy is actually, he's seeing advantage, he's not trying to jump off. He's seeing that there's right. And the world that we live in right now, and you guys have heard this, things are volatile, uncertain, they're complex, okay? They're ambiguous. And these are the situations that our leaders are dealing with every single day. I heard the discussion about, you know what we need to do? Is we need to get our leaders and managers to do more coaching. Okay? Questions back at you. Once again, just being provocative here. Most of us have people reporting to us. Okay? How did you change your performance discussions and your coaching discussions with people who report to you to improve their business impact? And if you didn't, why? We're busy. We've got so many projects to run. We've got so many deliverables to do. It's not part of our KPIs. It's not part of learning's KPIs, so why should it be part of business KPIs? We're on mission critical projects. I can't get to this right now. And if that's our excuse, right, how much more is going to be business excuse to do that? Right? So the question then is that if that's their reality, if that's the thing that they're struggling with, okay, what is our role in sort of changing this around? So here's the big shifts that are happening in the world today. Everybody's heard about the agile enterprise. Right? We need to be more agile. We need to be better able to address the situation and the circumstances that we see in the world today. Right? And so our CEO focus has shifted from growth. Okay? Yes, we still need to grow, but we know that human capital is the most important thing that will help us achieve growth. We need to improve systems, we need to improve processes. Yes, tick the box, right? But it needs to be appropriate. The thing that we struggle with as CEOs, as leaders, is getting people to do this. How do we get more out of people? So that's one big shift that's happening. The second one is around the definition of leader, of what is a leader in the business. Traditionally, we had this top-down approach, okay? The CEO, and then the board of the exco, and blah, 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 blah. But now we realize that if we're going to make real change, we need to have everybody as leader. Yeah. Everybody can create an impact. Other interesting thing. Right? The way that our organizations work, from this hierarchical view down to hierarchy. Right? Everybody is connected. If I had to ask you right now, you have to think back, and most of us lived in the 80s, if you scan it. I'll be careful there. But if we think about the 80s, how many people did you know outside of South Africa? If you looked at your LinkedIn profile right now, how many people do you know outside of South Africa? Right. Suddenly your network is immense. Okay. You have connections in so many different parts of the world. You can accomplish the unthinkable because you're not just connected to the people you can see, you're connected to hundreds of people you can't see. And I guarantee you that I'm probably connected to half of you sitting in the room. Okay. And the question is, how are we using those connections? Right. The last shift here that I'm thinking about here is the idea of performance management. And that performance management is moving from this, we have conversations once a year, people are suddenly surprised at why they did or did not meet their target. Okay? We give them a rating, we do a little bit of a bell curve, and we get some meet some, not all, met some, met all, and some exceed, and hey, fantastic. And people are still confused at the end of the day, what happened? Okay. We said this at the beginning of the year, I did that, we got to the end of the year, things shifted and changed, and now I'm not sure. Right? To this idea that performance management is a continuous conversation. Right? It needs to be part of the business that we do every day. We build that in. We cannot have performance management as something separate. We cannot have capability development as something separate to the business. It needs to be integrated into the things that we do every day. And be part of the system and the DNA of our organizations. Right. So the thought provocation around that. The other thing is that if we think about business transformation, it'll be the central way of working. We always think, oh, we're going to transform the business, and we're going to do that in a year's time. We work with a lot of fantastic international companies. Okay? Transformation is happening every day, all the time. Okay? So it's going to be a central way of working. And here's what some of the CEOs, some of the things that they're saying around why this is not working. So things that we know. Right? Strategy execution fails. So a lot of the strategies we try and do fail. Okay? We also have a situation where the change efforts that we have in organizations, they fail too. Now, we're trying to address all of this with human capital, with learning, with talent. Right? But here's the problem. Is that if we looked at our workforce, okay, 35% of our workforce today is totally engaged, which leaves us with a whopping 65% that are not engaged, or have marginal engagement.
Sorry, just to add to that, Anne Hewitt produced their latest survey, her latest report on engagement in 2014. It's also got some significant stats in it. So it also just shows that between 2010 and 2014, there was only a 2% improvement in engagement. Although this is the highest it's been since 2000. It's only been 2% in the US company survey. So it's still a huge problem. And that Deloitte also, there's report also showing.
So for the benefit of the people who are streaming here, is that only a 2% increase in employee engagement over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's right. Now we're trying to still do all this stuff, right? We still want people to be able to, but we're having a marginal change in employee engagement. Which leads me to the last statistic here, is that only a third of our executives believe that we are good at doing this stuff. We're very good at doing it. Okay. So we have an immense hurdle to climb. They're struggling to deal with just the business of doing business. Right? Now we want them to deal with the business of building capabilities, or getting people to do this as well. Right? So some interesting thoughts around that. So once again, it's a little bit of provocation to be with you guys. So I have this thought that in the world that we sit in right now, particularly Africa and South Africa, because we are a country without jobs without. We are not developing skills fast enough or in the right areas to maintain competitive advantage. I had the honor of being a part of the World Economic Forum in Abuja in May last year. Some interesting stats that came out of it. China, during the next financial year, they're going to increase their spend to $30 billion in FDI in Africa. Okay? $30 billion. So that was from 10 to 30. And then they were going to further commit another 50% of their FDI, okay, of the whole country's FDI, to Africa. So one is they upped what they were contributing, and then they just took another whole big chunk and they just dropped it on top of all of that. Right? How much of that do you think South Africa sees? Right? Google and Microsoft have both built massive data warehouses in Kenya and Lagos. They are missing us. They're just going straight into Africa. And they're not coming through South Africa like they said, oh, we're the gateway to Africa. We're not. Okay? We've missed the boat. Right? Things are coming in the sides and we're not ready for it. We're still sitting on our little island at the bottom of Africa and we're hoping that we're going to see this big ball. We're not. Okay, we're not ready for it. Okay. And although I'm saying it's a provocation, I think there are pockets of excellence. We're doing great things. Right? But we need to learn from those and how to accelerate some of that. Because that's what our business is trying to do. We have this idea that we can go into Africa and we can copy paste. Right? What works in South Africa must work in Zambia, right? Or must work in Lagos or in Ghana. Yeah.
Deon, I'd just like to comment on that. I had a really nice experience of a Nigerian colleague actually asking me, why do you think I need help?
Very good. Okay. Working with guys in Africa, there's a perception that South Africans are African.
Yes.
We understand Africa. You know, this is how one of, they're actually sitting in the room here, so I'm going to apologize afterwards. So one of my clients, this is how, probably most of our clients do this, is that they lump Africa as the following. So there is South Africa, and then there is the rest of Africa. How condescending is that? Right? There are 52 countries in Africa. Right? So there is no rest of Africa. There are 52 individual markets that we need to think about as 52 individual opportunities. Okay? With the same challenges that we sit with locally. And how do we start addressing those? How do we become more local on the African continent? Because this is where we're going to end up. Okay? Is that we know as a continent, the following is true. Right? Africa is growing at 5 to 7% as a continent. Right? We're one of the fastest growing continents, markets in the world. Some of those economies are growing in double-digit growth. Right? The question is how quick is our capability development? Is our capability development as organizations, as countries, is that matching that growth? Right? Because if it's not, we have a problem. We have a loss of competitive advantage. Because if we can't take care of that, someone else is going. The world is not waiting for South Africa to get on board. They're not waiting for us to catch up and let's help you see the advantages of Africa. They're going straight in. Right. They are much more ruthless than what we were hoping. Right. So this is I suppose the crux of it. Is that in terms of accelerating business results, we also need to accelerate capability development. Right. To at least match the rate of growth. No, it might be market potential. How many of us are sitting in situations right now where our leaders are saying, you know what, we see the opportunity in Africa, we just can't get there. We don't have the people, we don't have the business capability, right? We don't have the supply chains. So is it a question or a...
No.
You just agree as well.
Bring it down.
Fantastic. Right. And so it's about building capability. We work with a retailer, fantastic retailer. And one of the biggest problems that they suffer with, right, is about finding branch managers who understand retail on the African continent. Okay. Their ability to grow is not limited by finding the market opportunities. Their ability to grow is limited by getting the right people in place quick enough to be able to realize the opportunity. Right. I'm seeing a lot of money over here, so I'm hoping that I'm striking the right chord here. Right. So the question is, what does it take to accelerate results quickly? Right? And once again, working with a lot of companies, we hear this a lot. I think it becomes the secret sauce that no one really wants to dig into. Right? We don't want to know what the ingredients are. And in order to accelerate results, there's 3 key things we need to be able to do. The first one is about making sure that the organization is aligned. Right? And this means that everybody in the organization needs to understand what the strategy is, how the business is set up, and what makes that business distinctive for its competitors. Okay? So when we are thinking about developing learning programs, if we are not able to communicate those essential ingredients in that, that people understand the context of their work. Right? The difference between laying a brick and building a cathedral. Or building a mosque. Okay? If I don't understand what I'm doing, all I'm doing is putting one brick on top of another. My work has no purpose. So we need to be able to give people that context as to what is happening in the world around us. Okay, what is the organizational goals that we're trying to achieve? And very importantly, what is your contribution to those goals? So you guys know the story of the McKinsey people. I think it was McKinsey, one of the consulting companies who went to NASA. And they asked the guy cleaning the floors, what do you do at NASA? And he said, I'm here to remain. So his context of his job, right, was there to support the achievement of business objectives. So I think that's the one thing we need to do, guys. How great are we in the life of our organization? The second piece then is about the mindset. Right? What is the mindset of our people? And this comes to engagement. Eh? How engaged are they in our strategy, in our business, etc.? How good are we at recruiting the right people who not only fit the job that we want them to do, but fit the organization and the organizational context? That's another layer of complexity. And then the final thing here is, are we building the right capabilities? So we think about this, we need to think about it maybe in two different contexts. One is the business acumen, right? So do people have the required business skills, right, to understand the business and business context? The second thing is, do we have the right people doing those things? And the third thing is our organizational capabilities. And I think a lot of what we complain about as we sit here with as L&D is that we complain about the organization's capabilities to do what we need them to do. So IT is not coming to the party. Talent doesn't recruit the right people, so we train them. So I'm saying all the fun comments that we had here. And this is us learning about the organizational capabilities. And we need to be able to inform that as learning. But we cannot inform that unless we have the business and the mindset components understood and harmonized and being able to unpack that in a way that the business understands. That's how we're going to impact it. Right.
There it begs the question, and the comment is that we then identify the critical role that OD needs to play in guiding leaders and managers and L&D and HR, talent recruitment specialists in organizations to be able to support the transformation of organizations that we know 80% of the jobs that exist today will not exist in 10 years. So that is fundamental that the OD practitioners play a role in org design and org development in every area to help leaders know what capabilities they require in organizations and to have business acumen at the same time. I mean, is that what is coming to light, evidently?
So what I'm hearing you saying is that us as learning, what we should be doing is we should be helping inform those organizational capabilities, knowing what we know about where the world is going, how learning is developing, the capabilities that organizations will require in the future.
But we also need to then develop our own acumen in terms of OD and business so that we can have conversations with leaders to be able to inform them adequately.
I would say that, and this is purely my, what I say, I put it to you. Is that if we don't develop our own business acumen, if we don't develop our own corporate understanding, right, we will always be invited to the party too late. We have already decided that this is what we need to do. Design us something that will address that. Okay. And that's the problem where that we sit with right now, that we're always too late. Okay. We're at the back end of the value chain. Okay. And not informing the value chain. And the only way that we can get there is if we are more relevant as business. The other provocation that I want to put out here is that we have this dual gap that we're trying to address. Right? On the one side, we have baby boomers who are retiring at a rapid rate of knots, okay? And we as an organization are not actively trying to capture the learning that sits in their heads. Okay? What we're doing is that we're getting, and this is a negative for us as an external provider, is we get external people who have really cool content, okay? Whereas they go teach all our new people this stuff, okay? But we haven't captured the learning from the old part of the organization. And then we wonder why these guys don't talk to each other. So the context around which we are educating and developing our people is not necessarily done in an organizational context. Right? The second thing is that we are accelerating people who are not ready for the jobs that they have to do. And it comes down to my thought around this idea of practice to performance ratio. Right? And Sean introduced it a little bit earlier on from a kid's perspective. Is that if we think about the best sports teams in the world, we take, let's hope the SA cricket team, the Proteas go out and win, okay, they win the World Cup, right? What is their practice to performance ratio? In order to compete to win, right, how much time do they spend practicing? How much time do they spend executing? 6 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week, they are spending practicing, okay, in order to win 50 over game on the weekend, 100 over, 82 together. So the practice to performance ratio is really high. What is our practice to performance ratio as leaders and managers? Okay. We're expected to execute straight away. You land and you've got to execute. You come back from the training and you have to execute. Okay. In fact, most of the time leaders say, you know what, that was fantastic. When we went to that program, that's great, that's a big corporate program, fantastic, but here in our business we do things differently. Okay, so what you actually tell me is I spent 2 days, I learned a lot of really cool stuff, but I'm not going to apply any of it, and my learning curve goes out the window, and I'm not going to apply anything, so I'll forget it all. Okay. So we need to be very mindful of how we introduce people back into the environment again in order to support our learning. Right. And we're doing this with this recall. Right? There is a little bit of a formula here that I think we can rely on. Okay? And this is Bob Jansen, really cool. He said the following, that if you're going to work in this recall, there's a couple of things that you need to be able to do in terms of the context of learning. Right? That we need to create immersive experiential learning that provides people, but it's not a fixed body of knowledge, it's not something that exists in the textbook. Right. Can be parts, but it's a whole contextual set of lessons that people need to learn over time and you need to make them real. Okay. So how do we as learners start thinking about that contextual set of lessons that people need to learn? It goes into parents' learning chain. Okay. What is the learning chain we need to create and the context in which people are going to apply that in order to deliver a better result for the business? Okay. So I suppose the burning issue then is the following, is that we have these hyper guys, right? We want to put them on these rolling assignments, and we expect them to be competent. The thing is that these things can take years to learn. We don't have 10 years. 10 years from now, we're all going to speak Mandarin if we don't watch out. Okay? So what does that look like for us? So how do we make sure that Africa is speaking more Xhosa and Zulu and what we are Mandarin and fantastic language. Okay. At least maybe an equal portion. So the question then is, I suppose, is would it be possible to create high-impact, challenging experiences in a formal learning environment that could develop people in the same time what is? What do you guys think? Is it possible? Got a lot of shaking of the head here, so I'm guessing that something has to change. Right? So we have to make a change. We can't do this. What's that crazy saying? If you do the same thing you've always done and expect different results, you sign man is what's saying. It's that thing. So we need to start creating design experiences. Now, design experiences are thinking about the end. So, about the business impact. What are we trying to create a few years from now? Right? What are the business results we expect then? And how do we design backwards from there? And here's some thoughts around how to create these design experiences. The first one is that we need to look at not only our current business reality, but the future reality when we're designing these things. So what are the future business and leadership challenges that our people will face? What is the context in which they will face those? And create whether it be e-learning, whether it be classroom-based, whether it be experiential taken into Soweto, whatever it is. Okay? What is the context? What do you hope people to do with that information once they leave it? Okay. So we need to be really deliberate about this. The second thing is to give them opportunity to practice. So it goes back to, it's a little bit about time allocation, but it's also about the tools and the methodologies and the processes that we use in order to secure that there is deliberate practice of our information. The third thing is, how often do we get experts in the organization to give those guys honest feedback around their experiences? Okay. What we tend to do is, we might have an action learning project or something like that. They have to present to the board, to the people, and so they've got this scary bunch of execs who have been tasked to pick holes in everything that they have to say in order to create a learning experience. Okay. We haven't provided them with the coaching and the guidance from those guys in order to provide the context for the future of the business. The fourth thing is then, do we know what great looks like in our companies? Have we defined great? Do they have role models against which they can go and have a look and bounce ideas? Are we able to work with the leaders around these things? So not getting the capabilities and the competencies. I think competency models are great. Okay? But in order for us to be successful as an organization, we need to have defined what are the high leverage behaviors in our business that will make us successful going forward. And then get people to understand what great looks like, to practice great, and then to execute great. So, like in the journey. But we need to know what great looks like. Okay. So hopefully that's created some thoughts and some provocation for you around what does these experiences mean look like.
Sorry, Deon?
So, yeah.
Sorry, Deon. I mean, just your point one, I mean, that's why competency sets are probably the worst thing that ever come out, because again, that's really based probably 2 years research. It's about a basic, kind of standard benchmark, and no way speaks to competition and the future, being competitive and the future. So it's so sad with a lot of conversations about how do we entrench this competency set or set of behaviors. That's really not really helpful.
And I worry about some of these things in the way that they apply, because it's a little bit like, you stand with your foot in hot water, boiling water, and your other foot in ice cold water, and on average you're comfortable. Okay? It doesn't work like that. Right? We can't take the averages across averages. You guys know what is the most popular 30 centimeter pie in the United States? Most popular 30 centimeter pie, no big pie. Apple pie, okay. Good guess, well done. Right? So what is an apple pie, 30 centimeter pie? It's a big pie. And you're probably not going to, well, maybe South African. We won't eat it alone. So the next question, you get a small pie, 10 centimeter pie. What is the most popular 10 centimeter pie?
Blueberry.
Alright. So honey has been listening to me once or twice. Alright, so it's a blueberry. Don't do that at me, yeah. Right. So it's a blueberry pie. Why? But why is blueberry more popular at a smaller bite-sized level, okay, than an apple pie? It's 30 centimeters. Sorry?
Blueberries are more expensive.
No, it's got nothing to do with this. It's like the Cheetos. Okay, they're everybody's second favorite. We're looking at apple pie. Apple pie is everybody's second favorite thing. Okay, and so at the individual level, when I can make a choice, I'm not going to choose apple pie. When I have to make a choice on behalf of a whole lot of people, I'm going to take the most common second best option that everybody will be satisfied. And here is the conundrum that we sit with, is that we don't do enough drill down into addressing the individual, right? And we get what is average. And unfortunately, average doesn't work. You can't be average and compete to one organization. You have to be number one. Okay? But be number one or number two. So anyway, so something to think about. Look, my last slide is just really about a couple of things that we can do to create these design experiences. Right? So there's 6 of them. One is that we need to create unfamiliar stretching responsibilities, right, in our sessions. Right? So things that will help people stretch their abilities. Okay? There's nothing greater when I'm learning than the ability to prove myself. Why is gamification such an interesting way of learning. Okay? Because people can prove themselves. They're seeing the progress. And the progress is not a written test at the end. The progress is me seeing ticking boxes, me getting badges, me winning along the way. Right? And I'm winning with my friends. I'm not winning alone. Right? The third thing is about creating and owning change. How do we get them as leaders and as talent of the business to own that? Right? Very important is connected to the team and the business. Right? So we need to connect these dots. We can't have a strategic leadership program all on its own, which is only for a select bunch of people because we've chosen them to be the talent of the organization. They are the people who we're going to hopefully lead the organization into the future, and we hold them all to one side. Okay. Why does no one want to work with them? Okay. Because they're 5 people and we are 100. Okay. And then third thing is about empowering, how to make it an empowering experience and helping them overcome adversity. So all of these things need to be built and thought about as we think through these design experiences. It is about the technology, it is about the learning process, and it is also not about that at all. I go to a dentist because he knows what's going on inside of my mouth. He knows the structure of teeth. He knows when I've got a hole. I don't interrogate him as to whether or not he can also do an appendicitis extraction. Okay. I know what his purpose is. And same in organizations. Organizations trust you are the learning people. So please don't come and tell me about how to do more better learning. That's your job. Right? Tell me how it's going to impact the business. I trust you to make sure that you can choose the best things that will deliver the impact that is required. Right. So that is sort of the thought provocation. I mean, probably about 5 or 6 minutes ago. Facilitators, you know the process, so I'm not going to facilitate this any more than I have to. I do have my lovely assistant Paul, who is going to
saying Mr. said that from
Alright, so let's have a look. The biggest shifts that we see in learning today. Right? We heard about something, anything that you guys had discussed that was particularly thoughts, ideas. Fantastic.
We have one where the camera from this gent who's not anymore, but he's a works in design, and he was saying that learning is no longer just an event. It's actually a process, and that's one of the big shifts. We also spoke quite a lot about the fact that for a lot of us, there's a growing focus on global, beyond South African borders, and how do we work with that? And geographic spread. It's becoming very real. The cost involved, the carbon footprint, all of that, of moving people to central locations, to go to these training events. The time and money factors are key.
Okay, now I think often we have the discussion about how much is the event costing. So, it's going to cost us so much. If it's designing a great online session or something, which costs maybe triple that, but don't factor in the cost of flights, accommodation, people, blah, 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 all these other things, time away from the business, in terms of how we think about it.
You said a big shift for us was time to proficiency. So it goes back once again to your baby boomers leaving. And ultimately, you're a young leader who comes in, you need to pick up the retained knowledge, but be able to pick up even more because now what used to be 3 jobs is now 1 job, and you've got to get there faster. So time to proficiency is huge.
It's not only leader proficiency, just my simple ability to become a better leader, but I need to also integrate that into making the business a better business.
But even as It even goes down to something so simple like a call center agent who comes in and getting to know systems and processes and products and services, as well as the business and how I fit into the business. It's not something so simple as, where's the bathroom and how long have I got to go to the bathroom? So it's a huge impact in terms of the whole being that does that job.
And so just that conversation now with around how do we bring people into the organisation quicker? How do we get a year or two into the process that they feel already part of the DNA?
I think something unique to that succession plan. So specifically with leaders, there are people very good with leading the leaders coming in. More preparing them beforehand, before they actually need to perform. They actually understand what's required. I mean, it happens in restructures where, our CEO left 2 years ago, a new CEO was appointed, and I was like, okay, so there's a gap there. Who needs to go in there? Nobody really in the business is prepared for that role. And how do we actually prepare them before the need actually arises? So we try these 2 or 3 guys to go, okay, this can
I think there's also a big shift around developing talent internally and hiring people externally. We want to continue to grow talent because they are easily adaptable at those levels in terms of the culture of the organisation, the context of the business, rather than bringing someone else, which then the whole butterfly effect. They start flapping their wings and create tornadoes and other places. Right? Cool. Thank you.
The other thing that came across was learners' appetite for stuff that's unnecessary because of the amount of information you're faced with. If you're looking at learning design and people's appetite for what they actually want in a training session. Back in the day, people would sit and they would listen to stuff that was interesting, but not of really great value. People don't have the time or the appetite for it. They want to go and it needs to be meaningful, impactful, relevant, and they want to go. So,
I think that's one of the critical things. 100%.
Sorry, add on to that. In that context, it's not just what I need to know right now, but it's the management of the knowledge that I will need to know on the occasion that I need to know.
It's a whole idea of push versus pull learning. So classroom we're pushing stuff out and people, hopefully they go out and they apply it. But suddenly I'm on the job and I need it, where do I get it? Okay. I remember learning it in that classroom a year ago, but now I need to apply it. Where do I find it?
I think talking to that as well is going back to all of these that we said this morning. Training shouldn't happen unless it's done at business use.
Training is like training.
I need one burger, 1 chips, and supersize it.
Like that, supersize it.
Well, it's also about creating design that caters for your technological immigrants and the natives. So people who are born after 94 are the natives. So they're used to technology, they're used to a fast-paced society, and having access to information at their fingertips. Whereas those of us who were born before 94 take into a little bit of a slower pace, and we do need, not everyone, but so it is designing something that incorporates both extremes and making it interesting to both, whereas you don't lose one with boredom and lose the other with being too fast.
Just volunteering something that came out here as well was the need to communicate in the language of the audiences in which we're trying to impact and influence, to elicit a response and a result. So again, it goes back to the fundamental enabler of communication, that to achieve outcomes. And basically, one of the success stories of this lady shared was that her business, her colleague next to her, identified that cartoon visual illustration was a great way of language to communicate with the audience. And it elicited an experience versus a call to action, which through the experience created trust and affinity, and then respond from that to the audience. So that's important.
We also talked about, it's a new term that I just discovered, and maybe some of the veterans know this already. That's called situated learning. This is about creating a community of practice. And in a community of practice, firstly, we'll be peripheral members. And to be a legitimate peripheral member, there's certain things that we have to learn to be part or a member of this community of practice. It's very much like what we are doing here. To then moving towards the experts in the community of practice that basically self-manages the community of practice. It's a little bit more than social learning. The community of practice also becomes a repository of the knowledge. And the generations here becomes very visible because your younger generations would be in the periphery. And they would have to learn and master certain things to become more of the central members of the community of practice. The question that we also then had here is to say, so how do we capture and perpetuate and sustain all of that knowledge and skill that have been generated by the community of practice? So I'm answering the question with a question, I'm sorry. And the next one is also, so how do we create communities of practice within our businesses so that the business becomes a social place where people can learn comfortably and know who to go to trust, and also to trust for certain pieces of information. Who can I learn from? Who can I get coaching from? Who can I reliably get information from that will help me to do that?
That's why they paid you guys the big bucks. So really, anybody from the side? Anything to add? No question? Yes. There's been vocal the whole time.
I think just what we had to add was to say that constant reinforcement is needed. But how we do that is what makes the difference.
Yeah, and I think this is also so important that we need there is a set of tools that are available to us as L&D practitioners. We need to find the right ones, given the context of the business, the culture of the business, what we're trying to achieve in that business. Right? And if e-learning or digital platforms is not the thing, then let's not try and force it down. Let's try and meet the business where they're at so that we can take them on the journey, which might be something 25 years from now. Anybody gets question number 2? Yes. Yes, you did. Okay. So, what are the capabilities we should learn as business partners to business? What should we be thinking about? I'll capture this one quickly.
We spoke about business consulting. The consultant needs to understand HPI and business consulting. By getting to know the business, somebody even suggested this secondments to business for a period of time, so they actually get to know what the business is that they're serving, and obviously proper analysis will lead to better design.
That ability to understand what business is going to do. Yeah, that's hard. The best learning leaders, in my experience, have been the ones that have spent time in business.
We found that from an L&D point of view, the credibility, particularly in our manufacturing businesses, consultants actually go in at production meetings. You know, they go to HOD meetings.
Yeah.
Suddenly now, we're having sites phoning up going, listen, we want to do world-class manufacturing, we need you guys involved. So that is a massive, it's critical.
It's critical.
You can't sit in your L&D department, you actually need to be sitting with the business.
One of the questions that you can maybe ask yourselves as an internal L&D department is, what happens if the business outsources me right now? How would I run this business differently? What would I do differently? Okay. And so thinking, you know, the consulting mindset. Well, what else was better?
The other thing that we spoke about, and it's something as well, I've come to a bit of, working in a manufacturing environment, is having spent time with some of the engineers. There are certain engineering skills, you know, things, for example, that have made a very big difference to us going and communicating with business. Certain things like saying, you know, you asked us to put this program together for you, but we can see from your processes inefficiencies in this. What about if we did X, Y, and Z? Let's do some research, redesign your processes, and then we can put a training program. So having that ability has really added a lot of credibility, and not just in sort of our sites, operational sites, but even within HR. We've done that now. We're doing an HR cases. That's come with time and motion studies that we've done. It's come with engineers, which is not a typical L&D skill, but it's certainly made us a lot more credible.
Thank you. Yes.
I think it's quite it's quite easy. So undergoing it's any paradigm shift you presented on this morning. It's undergoing those paradigm shifts. And to me the answer is yes, that because that wasn't a fun set paradigm shift, really looking into the world of the knowledge economy.
Also, I think we keep talking HPI. We're not be talking performance improvement, not just human performance improvement. Because going back to, we found this process that doesn't work very well.
So just as the guys can hear, should we not be moving, how do we speak more business relevant language? Yes,
yeah.
So we create our own accounting. So we've got HPI and we've got all these fantastic acronyms that we've developed for ourselves, which makes us important.
Yes.
Because we understand that stuff. But not necessarily business. So how do we have more performance related discussions?
Over and above performance, ultimately anyway, we've got to help the business make that shift. And that means that the change capability that's very often outside of us or coupled into a project related stream or sits in another part of HR, now needs to become part of a function that we need to be part of more closely and be the change manager. So put in place the structures and part of our programs to make that shift within organizations.
Can I be a provocateur here? So I love how we're talking about all these things and they're absolutely relevant. And yet I feel that we're not introspecting enough on our own practice. Very simply, an example I could give is, so I come from a commerce background into L&D and I've taken it upon myself to actually learn what design and all these things are about. And I'm in a class as L&D manager for my firm, working with people who are SDFs and who are instructional designers who don't probably have the hierarchical view and the power status that goes with it that I have. And when I hear them talking in that class, my heart just breaks because they talk about no access to information, they talk about no ability to empower or to influence, they talk about fragmentation, and all these things they're talking about is not out in the business, it's we who hold those power dynamics and who hold those management opportunities to shift L&D that are doing this to them, if I could use the sort of us and them paradigm. So it's great that we talk about all these things that we could do to enable the business and we should do. I think we also need to introspect on our own practice as managers of people in the L&D space and as holders of or custodians of what L&D means in our own context. Because if we're doing this to our own people, we are fragmenting information, we're withholding information because we've associated knowledge with power. How are we going to influence that in the business? So great to look what's going out there. I think in addition, we should also look at our own practice as individual managers of the L&D space and how we're able to shift and be catalysts even.
So I'm just very conscious of time, but also just spoke to our chairman over here. As I said, we also started getting into the next phase anyway of what's going to happen. So let's continue the conversation a little bit and then we can start wrapping up. A lot of station game.
So that's such an excellent point. And I mean, here we sit talking to ourselves. We're really talking to some people that are employing us and paying us to do our job for their business. Why we need to, are we continually recording this conversation to send to our CEO? Because that is the point that they've employed us to do this, and 5 years from now, what would our business stakeholders say about our response to chapters? And here, so what are you doing to step up to the program? And I know it's hard, but we got to carry voice like gentlemen. Exactly. We've got to become more resilient. We've got to become more assertive. We've got to become proof that we are doing our job, because we could be out.
These are my very good points a little bit earlier. In that sometimes we have to take the lead without the content. There's no lesson plan, there's nothing exists, but we get the people together and we learn from it. That wasn't what you were going to say.
So the point that you made is that sometimes the learning
myself in a situation where I've had to let go and say, well, let's bring them together and let them lead the conversation. We facilitate the learning, we direct the learning, but they come up with it themselves. And it's sometimes very uncomfortable because you've got to let it go and trust in the process.
Okay.
And I think what's possibly really important, just looking on to that point, is that we have to get beyond the fact that we are teaching people content. We need to be developing whole people who are capable of thinking, who are capable of making decisions, and all those sort of elements of learning which I think just involve time.
And I think to support it also is, of course, one of those trends that we're all wrestling with is the busyness. And the more busy we are, the less we think. And so the courage to sort of take a leaders at SAB, but to give those SAB execs who run like bloody crazy people most of the time and not really here, to actually arrive in a session that has no objective other than to figure out what we've got to learn. I mean, you've got to sell that quite a lot. But the consciousness within the business, that's when they start realizing that sometimes, thank God, someone stops me to make me think for a while because I probably didn't stop myself. It's actually quite a powerful one. And that's probably part of the learning organization of the future. Expecting that time when it happens.
Very controversial to this again is to say that I'll guarantee you that 99% of the learning programs right now are content sufficient. The problem with learning is not in the content, it's in the before and after. How do we prep people for learning, and how do we support and drive after? And what we do is we spend all our money, all our clients close your list, we spend all our money redesigning the content, okay, and not enough on supporting the execution. Okay.
I think our biggest problem is that we said that we don't whose responsibility is it to do the pre and the post. And is it the line manager, is it the and then you go to the next okay, here's one of the projects, and then you simply go, oh, but it failed. Okay, whose fault? Is it L&D's fault? Yeah, it's redesign the program.
Redesign the program again. All right. Thank you so much.